Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Hylia's Eulogy. My name is Sharp.
And I'm Flat. Today, we will be discussing the mystery of the Zonai, a race of powerful beings that were introduced in The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom and never really explained.
However, before we dive into our explanation of the unexplained and our theories about their origins, it is important that you first have an understanding of our first video's premise, so you aren't confused once we begin in earnest.
If you watched our first video, The True Gods of Hyrule, then you know that we went over some pretty groundbreaking stuff in it. If you didn't explore that theory with us, please allow us to summarize. If anything confuses you, feel free to go watch our first video, and your question will probably be answered. I have a link in the description where you can watch it.
To summarize, we explored the Minish, a race of tiny creatures that descended upon Hyrule in its time of need and bestowed the Picori Sword, a blade of unfathomable might, and the Light Force, the source of unlimited power and life in the world, to the hero of men. The fact that they possess these treasures, and the fact that a Minish sage is able to create an artifact that matches the power of the Triforce single-handedly, among other things, suggests the Minish have been behind the lines more than we previously thought, playing the roles of the true gods of the Legend of Zelda series.
This has incredible implications to the rest of the series, particularly in the other games that reference the gods, and we have one in particular that we wish to look at today: Tears of the Kingdom.
When the game initially begins, we see mysterious ruins and passageways beneath Hyrule Castle, and Princess Zelda shares with us the legends of the people who most likely created them, the Zonai. The Zonai are a race of Hyruleans in Tears of the Kingdom called the Children of the Gods by the people of Hyrule, and descended from the heavens in a time that had long faded into myth by the time the events of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild occur. The Zonai leader, Rauru, married a human priestess, Sonia, and they established a kingdom they call Hyrule, where they dwelled for an unspecified time, sealing away demons in the depths and creating shrines of light.
However, the peace did not last, and when Ganondorf transformed into the Demon King by using Sonia's secret stone, a treasure gifted to the Hyruleans by the Zonai, Rauru was forced to give up his life to seal him away. Rauru and his sister, Minoru, had been the last of the Zonai, and their technology and magic was forgotten, buried beneath Hyrule Castle.
Although we are told that the Zonai allegedly descended from the heavens, and that they are the children of the gods, who are they really? We are never given a true explanation for why they exist, why they came down to Hyrule, and why they seemed to be naturally inclined towards benevolence.
If we think about it, though, we can draw some pretty important connections to the Minish themselves, which we talked about earlier.
The Minish and the Zonai share many traits, and the most obvious amongst these is their appearances. They both use green heavily as their main color of choice, and they both have long ears and snouts. Other similarities include that they both helped the humans, and they both came down from the sky with noble beginnings. Not only that, but their magical runes, as we see each of them use, are incredibly similar in both hue and shape.
Additionally, Rauru manages to, coincidentally, name his kingdom Hyrule, even though an unspecified amount of time had passed since the old Hyrule had fallen, and nobody in Rauru's era even seems to know that Hyrule used to exist.
Plus, if the Minish are the gods, and we can confidently assume that they are, and the Zonai are the children of the gods, as Minoru herself tells us, then the Minish and the Zonai must be linked to each other in a close way.
But all this gives us is a clue to the true nature of the Zonai, and we don't have a clear answer with just this evidence. How did the Minish become something like the Zonai? Or at the very least, how are they related at all?
The answer came to us while we were playing Tears of the Kingdom and interacting with an everyday object, the Zonai terminals. We caught sight of something alarming, which we had seen many times, but suddenly saw in a new light.
Atop the terminal designs is an eye, looking down upon the hand symbol, and two more eyes, each looking outward. This eye motif is present on nearly every piece of Zonai tech in the game, and certainly all of the most important tech or architecture. The pupils are round, the eyelash is robust, and it looked all too familiar.
We realized it could only be the Eye of Vaati.
Another quick recap. Vaati was a Minish, the apprentice of Eslo, who stole a Triforce-level object and transformed himself from something benevolent into something evil. He then desired greater power, sought the Light Force, and almost acquired it all before he was interrupted by Link. He transformed into an immortal demon and was destroyed by Link wielding the Four Sword. Vaati was reborn later and sealed away multiple times by the hero.
Vaati is linked to the Minish more directly than any other character in the series, since he used to be one, and now we were convinced that the Zonai were as well. Vaati's eye looks identical to the third eye that the Zonai have on their foreheads, and the pattern of the eyes in the realm where you fight Vaati is almost identical to the pattern of the Zonai terminals. They must be intrinsically linked. But how?
The Minish descended upon Hyrule long ago and bestowed the sacred gifts unto the humans. Once they had given the hero of men their power, they remained in Hyrule, mortal, hiding rupees and hearts and kinstones in the grass. They stayed this way for quite some time, their descendants behind the scenes, trying to make the humans happy.
It is a well-known fact that the timeline for the Zelda series is a bit strange, especially with the introduction of Tears of the Kingdom and all the confusion it brought. However, when you look at the evidence presented, we can confidently say that the Zonai did not descend from the heavens before Hyrule was established for the first time after Skyward Sword.
Although the Zonai descended in a time of tribulation and chaos for Hyrule, with no kingdom and no alliances, merely a collection of tribes coexisting with nothing but ancient tales to bind them under the descendants of the goddess, this Hyrule can't be the world that we see post-Skyward Sword. We see in Tears of the Kingdom that Hyrule Castle was built on top of Rauru and Ganondorf's seal, and that the castle had remained largely undisturbed until the Calamity. After all, the castle had been what was protecting the seal, and if the castle had ever been destroyed or removed, Ganondorf would have instantly broken free of his seal and returned to Hyrule.
Because of this, the Hyrule Castle built atop Rauru's seal must have remained undisturbed by evil or disaster until Breath of the Wild. Given the movement of the castle throughout the series, and how much it was changed and in some cases destroyed by evil as the eras passed by, Rauru's seal could not have remained intact throughout the course of the timelines, and Ganondorf would have broken out long before Tears of the Kingdom if the Zonai had existed around the same time as Skyward Sword.
On top of this, when we get a nice view of Hyrule in the past, thanks to Zelda, we can see that it is very similar to the Hyrule of Breath of the Wild, as well as the Hyrule of 10,000 years before Breath of the Wild. The chances that Hyrule would have been shaped and weathered by time in the exact same way twice is completely unreasonable to assume.
The explanation that the histories of the Zelda Encyclopedia and Hyrule Historia are incorrect is completely false. We have too much information and eyewitness evidence to the events and tales of Hyrule to assume anything except that Tears of the Kingdom is the game that has given us the faulty information, not anything else.
The most likely scenario for the events leading up to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is this. After a great disaster or gradual decay, the Kingdom of Hyrule has devolved into several different tribes, divided by race and rulers. It was unto this chaos that the Minish, who stayed behind in Hyrule and had been working behind the scenes for millennia, intervened once again. They came out of hiding and acted to unify the peoples of Hyrule once again under a single throne and banner.
But how could they have accomplished this? They were small, powerless, and mortal. They no longer had their vast well of the light force, as they had granted it to the humans eons ago, and they could do nothing to make themselves known or prove to the Hyruleans that they should be listened to. So, they turned to the greatest source of power they could find, a fallen member of their own kind, Vaati.
Think about it. Vaati was not dead. He was only sealed beneath the Four Sword. The Minish no longer had access to an infinite amount of power that they could use to unify the people. They only possessed small slivers of the light force that was still inherently part of their essence. So, they accessed Vaati through magical means and used his power to transform into something more than they already were. They became the Zonai.
Fusions of Minish, beast, and human, descendants of the gods, with an eye on their forehead that they opened when they used their full power. They were given magical abilities and secret stones, which could amplify their skills. They became a people of great might, and they successfully unified the land underneath themselves, with Rauru and Sonia as king and queen, the first king and queen of the new Hyrule.
However, since they were using Vaati's power, he still had control over how his power was being used. This is why, when Ganondorf obtained his secret stone, he grew strong enough to easily defeat all 7 of the sages combined, even though they all had secret stones themselves. In the past, the Seven Sages have been able to stop Ganondorf, at least for a time, even when he possessed the full Triforce. However, he was able to single-handedly defeat all of them in Tears of the Kingdom, and only another being wielding Vaati's power was able to seal him away, at the cost of his life. Vaati allowed Ganondorf to draw much more power through his secret stone than he allowed the sages to, most likely because they both wished for the destruction of the world. This is why they are called secret stones. Nobody must ever be allowed to know where they truly came from.
This would explain why the Master Sword, bathed in the Light Force for over 10,000 years, was still, as Ganondorf said, that fragile sword. If the Master Sword, a blade of godly might and imbued with the power to destroy evil, had truly been absorbing the powers of the Light Dragon for millennia upon millennia, it would have the power to destroy any demon effortlessly. However, it is still about as strong as it was before its rebirth, if not weaker.
The most likely explanation for—
Hey everyone, make sure to drop a like, comment, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Don't miss watching it. Get out of here.
My apologies. That was our brother Forte. He keeps finding his way into our recording booth. That probably will not happen again. Hopefully.
Anyways, as I was saying, the most likely explanation for Ganondorf's power and the Master Sword's weakness is that Vaati was controlling the amount of energy that was being drawn from the secret stones. He allowed Ganondorf 7 times the power of Rauru, and then stifled the flow of Zelda's Light Force as much as he could for the millennia that it recovered its strength. He couldn't stop Zelda from using the secret stone, since it had been created solely to access his magic, but he could control how much magic she accessed through it.
Rauru most likely assumed that this was the case when he witnessed what the secret stone had done to
It was
Ganondorf.
my hubris that set us on this path. I must atone for my error in judgment.
Rauru said this because he thought he could stop Ganondorf from taking the secret stone. But did he also say it because he thought he could control Vaati as well? He admits to his error in judgment, as well as knowing that he could not stop Ganondorf, only wishing to try and atone for his mistakes. Now, we have a few more observations to make, and then we'll wrap up.
The first question is, why was the Master Sword, so weak, able to destroy the Demon King, even though it was never able to destroy a demon before, usually requiring a magical item like the Bow of Light or the Triforce instead, or even simply sealing it away?
The most likely explanation is that when Ganondorf swallowed his secret stone at the end of Tears of the Kingdom, it became his main source of power, overflowing his being with dark energy and transforming him into a twisted beast, with the secret stone basically being his magical fuel. Once Link weakened the Demon King and exposed the secret stone, he used the Master Sword to destroy it, and, the core of its being destroyed, the demon dragon could no longer sustain itself and was destroyed. The Master Sword was able to destroy the secret stones because it had been imbued with the Light Force over the 10,000 years that it had been inside the Light Dragon's head, although the energy was being held back by Vaati.
Another question. If Draconification is caused by the consuming of a secret stone, what does this mean about the 3 dragons that we see flying around Hyrule?
As many have correctly assumed already, these 3 dragons indeed used to be Zonai, that swallowed their secret stones and became spirit beings, overflowing with their inherent Zonai power: fire, ice, and electricity. Immortal and seemingly appearing from nowhere, the dragons became heavily used in rituals and worship of the gods.
The reason that Draconification exists at all is most likely because of Vaati's influence. One of his main abilities was that of transformation, and so other beings, when they swallow a secret stone, transform as well, but the power is so great that they cannot control it, and they become slaves to higher beings.
The 3 Zonai-turned dragons became the guardians of the springs of power, courage, and wisdom, and the dragon became one of the key symbols of the Zonai, perhaps representing a constant reminder of the consequences of their arrogance and the decision they could never take back.
And finally, why could Rauru, if the secret stones are essentially vessels of Vaati's power, use the greatly amplified power of his light force to defeat his enemies?
Vaati's power is mostly, in and of itself, the light force, since he absorbed so much of it in the Minish cap. That is why we can see a shining light in the middle of the secret stones, despite the brand of Vaati's eye, even ones that had been corrupted by evil. Also, as we said earlier, Vaati could not halt the flow of his power through the secret stones, but he could limit it as best he could. Not only that, but maybe he did want the Zonai to draw on his power, and he most likely even allowed them access to his power himself.
Thank you for joining us as we went over our theory to explain the existence of the Zonai, their powers, and some of the phenomena that surrounded them during their brief stay in Hyrule.
As always, if you have any objections or questions for us that you would like us to answer, feel free to comment on the video, and I'll try to answer you as quickly and thoroughly as I can. Keep in mind, this theory is significantly more speculative than the last, but it still has proof that we cannot overlook.
Thank you for watching Hylia's Eulogy and our series on the Minish theory.
Until we meet again, farewell.